Welcome to today's artifact. I'm Professor Bob. I've spent all my life teaching high school and teaching college, and over the years I've collected quite a few objects that I've used in class. They're all considered artifacts for the most part. Now, an artifact is anything that is made by man that has cultural or historical significance. However, we also have a term called the tchotchke. If you look on this section of one of my bookcases here, you'll see President Clinton, President Bush, a can of beer signed by Billy Carter, and a variety of other things. Now, some people would consider those tchotchkes, and the tchotchke, if you can ever figure out the spelling, because there are probably 20 or 30 different ways of spelling it, is just usually a piece of junk or something that people have collected. But that's not really true with these, because they fall into the third category, which is souvenirs. A souvenir is a French term meaning memorable object. So if you've gone on vacation and you've collected a souvenir, some people may consider that a tchotchke, but you don't, because it has a meaning for you. It brings a memory up for you. So in these cases, they have a memory. If I have taught, and I taught American history, I taught Western Civ, I taught world history and a variety of other courses, and I would bring this material in the class, and it always generated a tremendous amount of discussion. So over these, who knows how many weeks, I'm going to be taking you on a walk through some of my collection of artifacts and how I utilize them in class. Some I did not utilize in class. I collected them hoping that at some point, besides being cute, they might be valuable. Never buy an object expecting its value to go up. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Now, our object for the day is something very simple. It's right here. This is not its normal location. Here in my main library, this is usually my working library where I have my books for my courses and objects that I use all the time in classes. This object, which is an ashtray commemorating the eruption of Mount Saint Helens, and I'll show you closer pictures a little bit later on, particularly when we go back to the desk. This is something that is in a box in the dungeon. The dungeon is the area of our basement where, when my wife and I got married, she allowed me to put some of my boxes of junk, artifacts. I collected stuff according to decades, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, through 2000. I always used to watch documentaries when I was young, and you'd see people at at different events in history throwing newspapers and whatever else up, and I was like, wow, get a time machine and go back and pick some of that stuff up. It would have significant value, because 99% of everything that was made is destroyed. A good example of an odd little artifact would be going to the Roman Colosseum and watching gladiating. And they sold wine in little glass containers. There are only a few of those left out of the millions upon millions that they made. But if you're holding your breath that your Chiefs cup or your New England Patriots plastic cup is going to be collectible, don't hold your breath. Although the plastic will probably last longer than the memory of it in many cases. So in the basement, I used to have cardboard boxes. And then I went to a credenza, a whole series of them stacked up so that I could put stuff on shelves. I would take you downstairs to show you them. However, the boss does not like that to be seen. Therefore, never mess with Professor Sherry, because she has the power. At any rate, I have some photos that I will show you of those as well. And now I have since changed that into a much more specific containers, easier to maneuver around, easier to store, and which you will see here. So that's the dungeon. That's where I keep all the little odds and ends. So let's head over to my desk so we can see a little bit better some of these objects. Okay, here we are at the main desk where you'll frequently see me, and I'm going to be showing you a variety of pictures of this. Now, where I saw this, it was very simple. I was watching the news when Mount Saint Helens blew up in 1980. And part of the news broadcast showed people selling souvenirs. And this happened to be one of them. The little ashtray says Mount Saint Helens. And the ashtray then, if you have a cigarette or a cigar, but I think a cigarette or a Tipperillo will work in here, you put it on the ashtray, it goes into the mountain, and up comes the smoke from Mount Saint Helens. Well, I had to have one of these. They would look great on my shelf for the American history material, particularly on the material that's with disasters. I do collect kind of disaster books from the past. For example, here is the 1889 version of the Johnstown flood. And then this is a more modern version of the Johnstown flood. The older ones tend to have a little bit of value. Of course, in American history, the best one is, of course, this one. This is the earthquake at San Francisco. And it has all sorts of different things in it. The interior is made pretty much right after the event took place, with photographs and memorials and all sorts of things. So people will collect these. They're really hard to find. I had one on one of the volcanic eruptions in the Caribbean. And in that case, one of the gentlemen in solitary confinement in the prison, they forgot him. And he survived, but they had to dig out the prison in order to save him. So this is an object that has, of course, value. If you are looking to say, well, I collect this type of material. It cost me $10. That's what the gentleman who I found a place, a souvenir shop in the West that sold this, and he shipped it to me. And I have been offered as much as $15 for it since then. But it is quite nice. Hopefully we won't have to have a volcano in Mount Rainier or worse in Yellowstone. But this is a simple little artifact. It was more interesting to the people 20 years later. When I was teaching American history at the college, I brought this in one day and they said, "What's that?" And I said, "It's an ashtray of Mount Saint Helens." And they go, "Wow, that's pretty cool." And actually the gentleman who sold it to me sent me a bag of Mount Saint Helens ash as well. And needless to say, it was interesting material. It made talcum powder seem like it was very non-porous. So that's a little something. This is kind of what I'm going to do with the little artifacts. Some of them will be real historical artifacts. As a matter of fact, the next time I'm going to do a little artifact that has World War II connections and connections with my family. In the future, Professor Sherry, who's been doing her family genealogy, has some really interesting artifacts. She has collected lots of material from the original families who came over in the 1840s, one of whom was given the Legion of Honor by Napoleon for surviving the Russian campaign. And so she has some interesting things that she will talk about. But gradually I'll take you around and show you the various things. Anybody who's a historian has all this kind of material. They just keep it. And then usually it gets passed on. Hopefully my daughters and their children will have it, although there's the great fear that this library will not fit in anybody's house at this point. But anyway, I just wanted to thank you, and I'll try to do one of these a week, but I have other projects that I'm working on as well. So thank you for tuning in.